Welcome, YouTubers, Rumble, and Facebook. We'll have that up here today as soon as we can. Today is Thursday, July 17th, 2025. This is News with a View, a Fat Cat production, hosted by me, the fat guy, John A. Costa. We're just waiting for the stream here to pick up. All right, I'm seeing this. Boy, what a pain it was today, getting this all working. Might look a little fuzzy or faded or bleached out, but that's just the way it's looking. This is the podcast you're looking for. And this is episode 105. Today's playlist of topics will be, of course, Epstein and what I think with the administration. Pelosi goes on record to say that Republicans are afraid of Trump. Maryland Judge Birthright said that another judge said that she would make it a class action lawsuit instead of what's going on right now, but it still would make it a nationwide order. Well, you can, and we'll discuss that. She could do that. And then a report on how Hamas used the media as a propaganda tool, and the media allowed it. And that was a research group, and we'll discuss that. All right. You know, the saga with Epstein, Trump, Patel, Bongino, Bondi, and they're calling it the Epstein scandal. It's not a scandal. Not a scandal. He was being held, and according to the federal records, he committed suicide in an empty jail cell with no guards present, no videos, nothing. And he committed suicide, right? So the problem that Trump and Bundy and the rest of them all have is they were adamant that there was a cover-up, that there was a scandal here, that there was some type of Department of Justice stuff going on. And of course that happened under the Trump administration, remember? The facts of the matter are that there's a lot of people who feel that I'm going to take this fellow's shot, probably a little bit wider shot there. There's a lot of people who feel that there's evidence out there, and that, Trump somehow is involved. Now, if that was the case, you know darn well that during Biden's administration it would have been leaked out, and they would have exposed Trump. It would have been ammunition so good that they couldn't resist using it. So what ends up happening now is that everyone makes these assumptions. I'm going to have some coffee here. I need it. And their opinions, their judgments, their accusations, their theories, their conspiracy theories. My basic take on it is very simple. you have major donors on record. Major donors for Republicans and for Democrats. Could be bad. You know, you could do a lot of things. Don't play with the cash register. And I think it's a balancing act for Trump now. That he has to go out there and say, you know, to his people, this really isn't important as, you know, we all made it out to be. And it really isn't important. It's not important. We elected, when I say we, the Republicans elected Donald Trump for another term to go after government inefficiency, to go after corruption inside top administrations, to get rid of top administrators who put children's education on the back burner and then shoved in the gay agenda and the LGBTQ agenda on people. And that was the only way they could get money. You know, schools had to do it or they didn't get federal funding. So Biden and Obama hired a lot of people. So did Trump. I mean, I'm not saying that Trump didn't hire people. But now he's cleaning up. And he's been challenged in the courts where I said he should never have been challenged. He had the authority. He always had the authority. And now it has been defined as his authority to go in there, and he can say how these how these agencies are managed. All right, that's done. But as far as the Epstein scandal, the only thing is Maxwell. What about her? If none of this stuff exists, what did they try her on? And if they were holding out and they were punishing her for not giving a list, well, the list doesn't exist, right? If the government says there's a list and they go through everything and they go, there's no list, you have to prove that you're saying there's a list. You have to prove that there's a list. Maxwell did not need to prove her innocence. That's the way the court rules in criminal matters. And that is the presumption of innocence. That you are perceived as being innocent until proven guilty. Now, they could hold you and they can do things because you could be a flight risk or you could be a danger, and, you know, and they could hold you. I think in her case, the government really jumped all over her and made it tough for her in a no-win situation. And then when Epstein left the detention, then in reality, then they only had her to go to. And that just wasn't the case. And she got stuck holding the bag. But she has a right to ask if there is no evidence, and the Justice Department is saying this doesn't exist. And then she has the right to question, well, everything should have been shown to her defense. Now, I am certain that everything was shown to the defense. But there probably is information out there that was not germane to the charges against her, and the Department of Justice might have said, we don't have to give this information because it's not about her, it's about person X and person Y and person Z. So you don't get that information. I think there's a lot of that. I think the government, it's not a list, they just have a bunch of documentation and a bunch of videos and a bunch of flight logs and a bunch of lots of things. And I don't think it's anything with Donald Trump, and I don't think it's anything to do with the people around Donald Trump at this point. But I think it is around people who are connected to not only the administration, but Democrats. Who would probably say, hey, listen, if I burn, you burn. And when I mean you burn, I'm saying that it won't be Trump, but it will be his administration, that all they'll be doing is defending themselves again. And, and this is where he said, hey, you got to stop thinking that it's not important. Well, it was important enough for you to make it a campaign pitch. And it's the same thing about RFK, wanting, Bobby Kennedy's and John Kennedy's information. Do you think there's any information really left there? Do you think that anyone would leave, pardon the pun type of thing, a smoking gun that would lead someone to say, hey, this guy said he knew who did it, and you guys just brushed him off. But it was a guy that would have known. Do you think that's in those reports? I don't. I think those reports have been looked over, and and the reports that they could be looking at, you don't know how many times they've been doctored since 1964 for JFK and Bobby Kennedy in 69 or 68. Martin Luther King, all that stuff's been rifled through, and there's probably very little that is truly out there that hasn't been rewritten to people's standards that needed it to be written that way. So I think the Epstein thing is a lot of nonsense. I don't think that it's real. What Epstein was doing there, oh yeah, no, he was a procurer. And yes, he was an agent for the United States. He was an agent for Great Britain. He was an agent for anyone who needed something. Now, did he report back to those other agencies to say, hey, I just met with Ching Ling over here, and he's meeting with this guy in Vietnam, and they're all coming to my island, and you might want to see who this guy is. Where other things were just strictly businesses, hey, I'm building cars, I need motors made. Well, I got this guy over here, he could build motors. Let me put you two together, and hey, see, maybe it works out beneficial, and he gets paid. he got paid. He got paid by the United States. He got paid by every agency he dealt with, and he dealt with them all. Mossad, the CIA, the KGB at the time, the NKV, them. He did it all. And this is what the government doesn't want to have come out, because there are other Epsteins out there. You think that this all ended with Epstein? They just took it somewhere else. There are people who are connecting people who are connecting people. And that's the way the world spins, folks. All right. Second little tidbit, I think I talked about that for about 12 minutes. I'm going to try to make this fairly quick, but it's not going to be quick because there's a lot of detail in here. In the HuffPost, an article, and like I said, I go to Fox's as far right as I go. I don't go to Breitbart. I don't go to Newsmax to pull anything to read. Don't do it. And I will go as far left as MSNBC. So, and then everything in between there. To get facts and then say how silly they are, or stupid they are, or how great they are, or yeah, that makes sense. It's wish I would have thought of it, or our guys would have thought of it. Must have been a reason they didn't. But well, to go back, Nancy Pelosi reveals the cold truth about why Republicans won't cross President Trump. So she knows. Nancy Pelosi, of course, Democrat, California, on Wednesday exposed why the Republican Party is so afraid of defying President Donald Trump, referencing a harrowing event in her family experiences. So, she was on Sirius XM, Zelina Maxwell's show. And she said many GOP members of Congress worry they could be attacked in the same way her husband, Paul, was assaulted inside the couple's San Francisco home nearly 3 years ago. So she's afraid that Trump's gang will go out there and attack like someone did her husband. Because the person that did that, David DePappy or something like that, was a right-winger and attacked her husband with a hammer. I mean, a lot of controversy about that whole episode, too. And Pelosi went on to say that's why they're afraid. They don't want their children threatened, their families threatened, their lives in jeopardy because they speak out against him. Now, how many Democrats have been hurt by Donald Trump's speaking out? Yeah, I'm asking. You could point out that the shooting in Minnesota, but that person already came out and said it had nothing to do with his political views. That was something else, and that will come out. But Pelosi went on to tell Maxwell that she finds it astonishing that congressional Republicans would be so ignoring of the institution that they represent, raising little to no opposition to Trump's demands, accusing them of abandoning their constitutional duty to serve as a check to the executive branch. Well, I find it interesting that all of a sudden, she is, all about safety of the people, and how dare the president do that? And the president never has said threatened anyone. Never once has said threatened anyone. Remember Joe Biden said, I'd beat him up? I'd beat Trump up. Give me a couple minutes with him. I'd beat him up. Remember that? Remember that peaceful guy? Still, Pelosi seemed to concede that it was understandable that many would have reservations about speaking out against him, given that Trump could seek revenge from them, including by using the Department of Justice and the FBI to launch baseless investigations against them. Well, Nancy, what about you running with Schiff and Schumer with Hillary's dossier report that was fake? You forget that. See, the Democrats think we forget all this stuff. But we don't. And come 2026 and 2028, we will all bring this back out. And what am I talking about? How soon do you forget Maxine Waters encourages supporters to harass Trump administration officials? And that was in June 2018. And that was from NBC. Okay? The Salina Journal, August 2018. Examples of harassment. Director of Homeland Security, Kristen Nielsen, couldn't enjoy a meal in Washington without being verbally attacked and heckled in a restaurant. So people were coming in there. Trump spokesperson Sarah Huckabee Sanders couldn't enjoy a meal at the Redhead restaurant in Virginia without being heckled and asked to leave. Why? Because her political views on issues were not shared by the Redhead's owner. Translation, because she was a conservative, a Republican who was guilty by her association with President Trump, and this was in 2018, was asked to leave. She left without causing a scene because she didn't want to cause a scene. And I've seen many no shirt, no shoes, no service signs in my lifetime, but I never seen a posted sign that said no shirt, no shoes, no service, no Republicans, which she has seen. So, and of course, people cannot discriminate on that basis, but they did. And Waters went out there and said, be violent. Be violent. Get in these people's faces, their families. Go to their schools, their children's schools. She said that. The Democrats said that. Schiff was censured for lying. You think we're going to forget that? Do you think for a minute we're going to forget that in 2018, then Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi and her boyfriend were verbally assailed, heckled, and harassed at a movie theater in Florida? So Democrats hate President Trump so much that they will resist and obstruct any of his policies and supporters in order to achieve their agenda, the liberal agenda. Many Democrat Party supporters are totally unhinged and out of control. And that was out of the Salina Journal. It's not me saying it. You had Democrats out there every day. Every day. This is the revolution. Remember they kept talking how we were going to have a civil war. And democracy was in trouble. And Trump was going to take our democracy away from us. Right? Remember that? And again, how many times have I said it on my podcast? When I see articles like this, I'm going to just refer back to facts. Who locked us in our homes? Who prevented us from going to our churches or places of worship? Who stopped us from family gatherings? Who stopped us from shopping? Who stopped us from flying? It was the Democrats. Who wanted to put people in camps that would not acquiesce to getting a COVID jab? Who were the people that wanted maybe you to have to wear an insignia saying you were vaccinated or you weren't vaccinated? Oh, I'll remind you again. It was the Democrats. Who said, call the police on people you see gathering together. Watch your neighbors. The Democrats. Who took the old out of hospitals and put them into nursing homes to die? In New York and New Jersey, it was the Democrats. The Democrats are the only people on record that I know of that almost got away with taking our freedoms away from us. We weren't allowed to challenge the PTA. Well, we weren't allowed to challenge schools through the PTA. And you talk about, Pelosi talks about, and this is all going to come up again, about, launch baseless investigations against, Republicans or Democrats. How about the FBI going after parents as terrorists who said, I don't want my children to be indoctrinated with LGBTQ. That's not what I'm sending them to school for. We won't stand for this. Oh, you're a terrorist. That's a threat. You forget that? We don't. And we are going to make sure everyone is reminded of that. And you could say, well, you're beating an old pan. You bet. You bet we are. And you know why we're going to beat that pan? because you ain't got nothing. You have no plan. You have no direction. David Hogg put his money on that guy in Arizona. He got less than 21% of the vote. They was hoping for another socialist win, like in New York. You Democrats, you're out of your minds. Out of your cotton-picking minds. And this is not going to stop. This is only going to pick up. And as President Trump gets more and more of his agenda going, and yes, he has an agenda. We voted for him to have that agenda. And yes, I get it. It's not. I don't like seeing people lose their jobs. I was a big labor guy. I know that's a lot of the thing is, but a lot of the people are saying you can't be labor if you have that opinion. And I go to the contrary. And I'm putting my little sign up over here because you can see it. And that's a government agency that I support. But the bare bone facts is you can't have a union unless you got a job. You gotta be working to have a union. And you need jobs, you need industry. So yeah, let the president get these jobs back. Let him go and then let him give deals. Because eventually it comes down to us. And we can go in. Nothing's been changed on the NLRB in its ground rules for organizing. And I did not have a problem with Biden and the NLRB and the things that he has done with that. I said that was pro-labor. That was fine. And I didn't disagree with everything Biden did. I don't agree with everything Trump does. Gotta use common sense. Now, when it comes to the U.S. Constitution over here, that's out of the frame. I gotta fix that. Take that angle a little bit more. But the Constitution is not common sense. The Constitution is the law. Now, how it is applied, see, that's where it can get sticky. Because the robes, and I call the Supreme Court the robes, they can't change the words of the Constitution. But what they can do is apply the words towards an agenda. And then they make a ruling. Roe v. Wade. I keep bringing that up. You can't appeal the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court cannot be appealed. You can't say, hey, I'm going to... That is it. Now, the Supreme Court, if challenged, can revisit a decision made by the Supreme Court, either by the current Supreme Court or a prior Supreme Court. They could go back and look at it and go, yeah, we're going to revisit that. And just because they revisit something doesn't mean they'll change it. Most of the times when they won't do something, or they politely say no, is we're not going to hear that case. And then whatever the lower court had agreed upon and said, well, that's what it is. And you can't go, well, I want I want a stay, or I want this not to happen while we're arguing this to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court won't hear it, it's over. It is over. Until you come up with a good reason that made it back all the way up those stairs again to end up at their door. And it takes a lot to get a square block up a hill. So, but the Supreme Court's ruling are final. That is it. Now, I think what's going to happen, and this is going to segue into my next, which was the federal judge says she would block Trump's birthright citizenship order nationwide. And this is U.S. District Judge Deborah Boardman said in an opinion Wednesday that she would grant class action status on behalf of all children affected by the order and grant a preliminary injunction blocking it. And that would be a nationwide block. Now, she can do that up until July 27th. Then everything has to be a class action. Now, she could take stuff and make it a class action, but it gets complicated because a class action only affects people of a known class. So you have to register. That's why sometimes you get something in the mail and going, and this is just, this credit bureau was found to be negligent in releasing information, and they didn't protect their files, and they got hacked. And you might be due compensation for it, but only if you get on the list. So you could write out a whole thing. They give you a little thing, boom, 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 boom. Add pages if you want, boom, 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 boom. And then it goes forward. And depending on the gravity of what had happened to you and a dollar amount, and they have it, that's all specified, is what you get. Now, of course, the lawyers who do that then get a little bit bigger cut because, well, now I'm representing, 10,000 people, not 2,000 people, and my fees and everything else accordingly. So, but you have to have the people there. Most class action lawsuits are civil. Now you could have federal civil, so a little bit different than a criminal type of situation. But she said she would go ahead and automatically turn that case into a class action and thus push it forward, but that would only be for Maryland. And she couldn't do it for California. She couldn't do it for any other state but where she represents. And that's why it's called a district. Now you have federal judges that can oversee, multiple states and stuff, and you have the Ninth District in California, which takes in, whatever, Nevada and Utah and Washington and Oregon, Idaho, and things like that. And you have all these ones where they can do it, but again, they have the power to go nationwide. So, but you'd have to take that up the steps. Now, if the Supreme Court goes, we agree with Donald Trump, with his argument. And when I say Donald Trump, it is with his administration. This isn't Trump versus, this is the United States versus. So they're asking for a ruling. It will get interesting. I think that's the way it works with that, like a Roe v. Wade type thing. But the situation on birthrights will either get heard, which it has, and will be clarified. And I will tell you, there'll be a lot of people that are going to be upset by that clarification. And I think you all see the handwriting on the wall. You see it, right? And I said this from my first podcast, that it is my belief, after reading everything there is on the 14th Amendment, and not just the words. It is not just the words. It is the meaning of the intent applied to the words. And yeah, it wasn't meant for what people are saying. And I think you're going to have the Supreme Court challenged, and I think the Supreme Court is going to make a very, very unpopular decision. And because it is not a popularity contest, it is what the intent and meanings go to. Tough crap. You're upset. You'll get over it. Yeah. If you were born here after, July 27th. Well, before. Because there has to be some mechanism to go, this wasn't challenged, so we're going to accept it. But from this point on, nope. And that's a start. Now you can go back and go, all right, the kids have citizenship. Parents don't. They're illegal. Unless one of the parents are a citizen, and then, yeah, okay, let's get you all bona fide. And that's fine. Barring that individual doesn't have a criminal record or has been in the courts. Now, that's where I say I have my differences with the president. In today's world, you get caught with marijuana in your car. 9 times out of 10, unless you're distributing. It's a ticket. Yes, it's a misdemeanor. But it's not a big deal. Now, if you were accused of domestic violence, but never charged, should that halt a person? They were never charged. So it's one of those things where you can look at it and make a determination, but my thing is that you could be charged. And if you're not charged, that's all it means. You were accused, but you were never charged. Have a nice day. It's meaningless. It's meaningless. Now, a DWI, if you did it once, no one was hurt, you paid your fine, you might have spent 60 days in county, don't know. But that was 3 years ago. How about the person that was 6 months ago? How do you handle that? Now, why did you think California and New York and all these places changed what they classified as shoplifting as a misdemeanor? That it had to be up to $900 or something for you to be charged. Because shoplifting is a misdemeanor. It's a crime. You know, kids shoplift, they get caught, and okay, that's not a big deal. But now you see these kids going into places, and it's rioting. They didn't go in there and steal a blouse or a piece of makeup or something like that, a belt. They didn't do that. And if they did and they get caught and it was, hey, yeah, it was stupid. Yeah, I did it. I fessed up to it. I pleaded, and I have a no trespass there, and I don't go there. All right. We'll put you on this pile over here, but if that's all that happened, when we're done at it, go to sleep tonight and rest assured. What if you robbed a liquor store, or you beat someone up, or you raped them, or you sexually abused them, or you did something much more nefarious? Yeah, you're going. You're going. Do I think that people who are naturalized citizens, depends on what their crime is, if it meets the criteria that is the law, well, you could go down that road. You could, and we've done it. Every president has done it. Has denaturalized people. It happens. So, but as long as you follow what the law, if you said that guy was a drunk driver and he has a green card, he's a U.S. citizen now, I'm going to deport him. No, you cannot. The law does not allow you to do that. You punished him once, you can't punish him again. That's it. So we know that. So we know that now we have Judge LaPlante also did that in New Hampshire, and we have this judge, Boardman now getting on board, and we'll all get. So it's still out there until the 27th, and it still don't know if these judges can change willy-nilly a case from what they were doing to a class action. It might all have to be refiled and redone, and again, if they refile, it still has to, you can argue it. So this will be an interesting turn of events after the 27th. Now, I've been talking over 50 minutes. And this is from Fox. I wanted to see. That other story I was talking about was from the Associated Press, just so you know. You can look up that on Associated Press. They all have it, but I just took it from Associated Press. Just the facts. Just reading the facts. And pushing out what they said were the facts. This Fox News study claims U.S. news outlets served as a megaphone for Hamas in Gaza war. A study by the Network Contagion Research Institute, the NCRI, I never heard of them, alleges that major U.S. and European news outlets served as uncritical megaphones for Hamas-liked narratives during the war with Israel in Gaza. And they made the claim that this affected our food operations while shielding the terrorist group from scrutiny. So, you look at this, are you saying this is why Trump is going after U.S. aid? You know, so you got to take a little look at it and say, all right, you got the facts here. And I did not read the 102-page report yet because this only came out today that I saw this. So I did not read the report. And I don't know what they're using as their factual point, but they made this claim. And it's a 102-page report. The Fourth Estate sale. So already you know that it's been skewed a bit. That, you know, just so you know, the media was always the Fourth Estate. And that's a term, look it up, but that was always called the Fourth Estate. And they're saying it was for sale. How American and European media became an uncritical mouthpiece for a designated foreign terror organization. And they said this included outlets including MSNBC, CNN, The Washington Post, and Reuters, published or promoted unverified claims from Gaza Health Ministry without disclosing that it is controlled by Hamas. Well, I don't think that if you were to say this person in Iran was speaking and making these claims, I'm sorry, it's Thursday and my lawn is being done. I can't blame my neighbors, this is my lawn. He does not have to say, I'm a spokesman for the Iranian, blah, 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 because he's already making a statement. I'm going to assume that he's not doing it on a soapbox in that country because he'd be at the end of a crane hook hanging. So some of the stuff is a little bit out there. The narratives, according to the study, falsely blamed the U.S.-based Gaza Humanitarian Foundation for deadly incidents that fed other global issues. And their suggestion is we need to audit the media. How do you audit the media? How do you audit the media? You cannot, I mean, you can, but what teeth do you have to do it? Who does it? And what are the criteria? If a spokesperson from that group came out there and said, they killed 500,000, people today in a bombing, and the news reports that, are you saying the news shouldn't report that? Or should the news put the disqualifier on it and saying these are from unsubstantiated reports, but a spokesperson from The health ministry in Gaza, which you'd have to say was, he wouldn't be saying that unless he was part of the government. So, the Reverend Johnny Moore, president of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, told Fox News Digital that the report validates what he and his team had been enduring on the ground since launching aid operations in early 2024. On one level, I wasn't surprised by the finding because I've been experiencing the effect of these lies for weeks. But on the other hand, I was shocked by the sheer scale of it all. Let's be clear, media outlets in the United States, UK, and in the continental European area are literally doing the work of terrorists. They have become a default press secretaries for a designated terrorist organization. As absurd as that sounds, that's exactly what has happened. Now, that's the news business, folks. And I can understand the research paper and that went into all that. Show me where it all ties in. And does it matter? Honestly. Because we've had that before. Send me the pictures, I'll furnish the war. We've had this before. We've had this discussion. Remember the Maine. Remember the Alamo. We've had these discussions before. And I just don't see in a report like that and then say, we must audit the news. By who? The Minister of News? I mean, see, that's where I feel problems can take place. We have investigative journalism. Unfortunately, they're skewed to, Fox is skewed towards an agenda. MSNBC, they're skewed towards an agenda. Any of these outlets are skewed by an agenda. Remember when Sports Illustrated put a trans up there? Or someone that weighed 400 pounds in a bathing suit? I mean, honestly, you don't think that was agenda? You know, people stopped buying it, and I mean, it was silly, but, you know, there's a lot of silly things that go on. All right, well, that's the news. I'm going to see what else goes on. I might do one tonight. Not sure. Might do one tonight, but put it out for Friday. Because usually Friday's not a busy news day, unless the Supreme Court makes a ruling, and they like doing that on Fridays and stuff. But they're not doing anything. Well, they are, but they aren't. All right. You know my little spiel. If you can make a donation to a charity, please do. You pick the charity. Don't have that charity come to you. Don't be a victim helping a victim. If you're not comfortable with that, a couple of cans to a food bank. That'd be wonderful. Say a prayer. Prayer does work. And, you know, I'm not going to say spay and neuter your pet or anything like that, but everyone have a safe day and evening. Hug each other because you never know what happens. And I'll catch you later. I'm going to fade to black. And then for my YouTubers and everyone else out there other than my record, I'll come back up with color bars. All right? As I Fade to black. This fucking thing stopped. Where did I run out of space? Didn't realize it, and I should have looked. And now I'll be fucked. Oh, let's hope that didn't go out. It did